Dogs bark in the distance, metal clanks, and the wind carries the cry of a child through the dark. 19 children, born in chains, condemned to live and die as property. But one woman refused. One scarred, unbreakable spirit who rose from bondage and turned herself into a shadow that slave masters feared to speak of. Harriet Tubman, the Phantom of the South. The woman who made freedom a weapon. In the mid-1800s, the South was drowning in cotton and cruelty. Every field was a graveyard for dreams. The air smelled of sweat, soil, and punishment. The overseer's whip cracked like thunder across human skin, while children were taught that obedience was survival. Plantations stretched beyond sight, beautiful to the outsider, filthy to those forced to live beneath their perfection. America's peculiar institution, they called it, a phrase polished to hide the screams. And then came a girl named Araminta Ross, small, quiet, yet burning inside. Beaten, starved, nearly killed, before she was 13. A head injury left her with visions and fainting spells, but she called them messages from God. When she finally escaped in 1849, she should have disappeared. She could have crossed the border, changed her name, lived free. But freedom, to her, meant nothing if others were still shackled behind. So she turned back. Into the nightmare she had fled. Back into the mouth of hell. The system she challenged was built on fear. Every road guarded, every whisper punished. Children were chained not just by iron but by terror, taught that the night itself hunted them. They were sold by weight, like cattle. They cried themselves to sleep beside mothers who knew a traitor could come tomorrow. Harriet remembered. She remembered what it felt like to be small and helpless, hearing the wails of another child being dragged away. She swore those sounds would not echo forever. The North Star became her compass. Her weapon was silence, her faith unshakable. Out of this faith, a secret network spread through America's underbelly. No rails, no trains, just hidden paths and brave souls called conductors. The Underground Railroad. Its tracks ran through swamps, barns, cellars, and church basements. Every light left burning in a window was a signal: safe here, keep going. Harriet Tubman became its boldest conductor. Each mission a death sentence if she failed. She moved through forests barefoot, carried infants who could not stay silent, led terrified families across icy rivers. The stars above were her only witnesses. Sometimes she carried a revolver not for enemies, but to keep courage alive among those she led. She would whisper, "Freedom or die. No one turns back." It wasn't cruelty. It was necessity. One frightened soul could destroy them all. Her legend grew in whispers. The enslaved spoke of a woman who vanished through smoke, who walked on water, who made chains dissolve. Masters cursed her name. They called her witch, thief, outlaw, anything but savior. But to those who followed, she was light itself. Her most daring plan was still to come: 19 children hidden in the plantations of Maryland's eastern shore. Children born into the system she once escaped. To rescue them meant walking back through towns filled with bounty hunters who wanted her dead. Posters nailed to trees read, "Wanted, Harriet Tubman. $40,000 reward." That was more than the price of 50 men. And still, she returned. She watched the children from the shadows, some too young to walk, some old enough to know the cost of trying. At night she crept through fields, slipping past guards who slept with rifles by their beds. She fed the dogs herbs to dull their senses. She carried scraps of food, a small Bible, and an iron will. When she reached the first cabin, she whispered, "You're free now. Come with me." No grand speeches, just faith in action. They moved through swamps, through freezing rain, through the stink of fear. She hummed low songs that masked their footsteps. Every rustle could mean death. Every sunrise was a race against discovery. She taught the children to follow the rhythm of her steps, fast when danger neared, slow when she prayed. Sometimes she knelt, staring into the darkness, and said she saw signs, lights no one else could see. Maybe it was faith, maybe madness, maybe both. But somehow, those lights always led them forward. Days passed without food, their skin cracked from cold. A boy begged to turn back. She lifted him in her arms and whispered, "You've already come too far to die a slave." And so they walked. North, always north. The nights grew longer, the air sharper, the stars their only map. Behind them lay the South, a land built on pain. Ahead, the North, a whisper of salvation. And somewhere in between, death waited patiently. Slave catchers rode with lanterns, hounds sniffing the wind. They knew Tubman's routes, or thought they did. They had heard the stories of a woman who vanished into fog, who left no tracks. Moses, they called her, half in mockery, half in fear, but they never caught her shadow. One night, she heard the dogs howling behind them. The children froze. She pressed a finger to her lips and led them waist-deep into a river. The water bit into their skin like knives, but the scent trail washed away. For hours they stood still, shivering, praying. A baby whimpered. She held it close and began to hum. The same hymn her mother once sang to drown out her cries. Steal away home. When morning broke, the hunters were gone. The children slept on the Bay D. riverbank, wrapped in wet rags, alive. Harriet knelt in the mud and thanked the heavens. We live another day, she whispered. Her body was failing. The old head injury struck her with sudden fainting spells. Sometimes she collapsed mid-step, seeing visions she believed were warnings, yet she never turned back. When you hear the voice of God, she said once, you do what he tells you. Every mile north was a lifetime. They hid in barns, cellars, hollow trees. Kind strangers, black and white, risked the noose to shelter them. Candles in windows became their beacons. Every light meant life. Every kindness meant another blow struck against the monster of slavery. Finally, after weeks of travel, they crossed into Pennsylvania. Freedom soil. For the first time, the children could walk in daylight. They ran, laughing, touching the grass as if it were made of gold. Harriet stood apart, silent, tears shining in her eyes. She had done the impossible again. 19 children. 19 futures reclaimed from the jaws of hell. But freedom was never the end of her journey. It was only a beginning. She made trip after trip, each one more dangerous than the last. Always returning, always guiding. I never lost a passenger, she said proudly, and she never did. Yet courage has its cost. Every rescue left her with ghosts. Faces of those she couldn't reach, names of those sold away before she arrived. She carried their memory like weights in her heart, hunger, exhaustion, and grief her constant companions. Still, she kept moving. Because standing still meant others would die. Her legend spread faster than truth. Southern newspapers painted her as a menace. A small, scarred woman with a pistol and a Bible, one wrote. A $40,000 reward hung over her head, enough to buy a mansion. Yet no one ever betrayed her. Fear, respect, maybe both. But they called her name in whispers. Moses is coming. In the North, she was revered. Frederick Douglass said of her, you worked in the night, while I worked in the day. A praise as sharp as it was true. She was the blade that cut through darkness. Still, when the war came, she did not rest. She became a nurse, a spy, and finally a soldier. She led a raid along the Combahee River in South Carolina, freeing over 700 enslaved people in a single night. The woman who once crept barefoot through swamps now commanded troops. The Underground Railroad had become an army. And yet, when peace returned, she found herself forgotten. No medals, no wealth, just the same calloused hands and an aging body that had carried too many burdens. She lived quietly, giving what little she had to others. The nation she helped save turned its gaze elsewhere. But her story refused to die. It lived in the songs of freedmen, in the prayers of mothers, in the courage of every soul who dared to defy injustice. Historians would later uncover the full scope of her work. Over 70 lives directly rescued, hundreds more inspired or guided indirectly. Among them, the 19 children whose names faded into history, but whose bloodline carried forward into generations of freedom. Each of them, living proof that even the smallest flame can set the world alight. Her faith was her compass, her will, her weapon. When asked how she did it, she simply said, I always trusted my Lord. I always followed him, and I always got my passengers to freedom. She died in peace, surrounded by those she had saved, whispering, I go to prepare a place for you. Her roads are silent now, but if you listen closely on a quiet night, through rustling leaves and distant thunder, you might still hear footsteps, soft, steady, unstoppable. The footsteps of a woman who refused to bow, who turned her pain into purpose, who walked through the valley of death 19 times and came back carrying children in her arms. Harriet Tubman did not just free the enslaved, she freed the idea that one person could not change the world. Her story is not about escape, it's about return. About a woman who looked back when others told her to keep running. About courage that doesn't end when the sun rises. Because courage, like freedom, is something you must keep walking toward one step, one night, one life at a time. Soft music fades. The forest goes still. A child's voice whispers, "Thank you, Miss Harriet." And somewhere in the distance, under an eternal night sky, the wind answers, "You're free now. Keep going."